Hey Abdou, long time no see. How's life treating you these days? Hey Hatim, yeah, it's been a while. Life's good, but, the usual ups and downs. Actually, I've been reading this book recently called Grit by Angela Duckworth. Have you heard of it? It's all about passion and perseverance, how those two things matter more than talent when it comes to achieving long-term goals. Duckworth argues that being gritty is the key to success, and not just raw talent or intelligence. Exactly. She makes a strong case that effort counts twice. First, effort turns talent into skill, and then it takes that skill and transforms it into achievement. Talent is just the starting point. I can see how that would make sense. I know plenty of people who are really talented but never seem to follow through. They get distracted or give up when things get tough. Yeah, that's one of the big ideas in the book. Duckworth talks about how society tends to glorify talent, but often overlooks the importance of perseverance. She calls it the naturalness bias, where we think someone's more impressive if they achieve things easily, like without effort. Exactly. She gives examples from all kinds of fields, athletes, business leaders, musicians, and shows that the people who are the most successful are usually the ones who work the hardest over time. Talent only takes you so far. It's the effort that leads to mastery and achievement. I like that concept of effort counts twice. So does she explain how to actually develop grit? Is it something you can learn, or are you just born with it? That's the best part. Duckworth says that grit can grow. She breaks it down into 4 key psychological assets that anyone can develop. First, you need interest. You have to find something you're passionate about. Then there's practice. And not just any practice, but deliberate practice, where you focus on improving specific areas and keep pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Makes sense so far. So you need to love what you do, and then you've got to put in the hard work to get better at it. What else? Next is purpose. This one's all about connecting your work to something bigger than yourself. When people feel like what they're doing has meaning beyond just personal success, they're more likely to stick with it through tough times. And finally, there's hope, the belief that no matter how hard things get, you can improve and make progress. Gritty people are optimistic and resilient. I really like that. Purpose seems especially important, doesn't it? It's like if you're just working for yourself or for a paycheck, it's easier to give up when things get hard. But if you're working towards something that feels meaningful, you're willing to push through more challenges. Exactly. Duckworth says that when people find purpose in their work, they're much more motivated to persevere. And that's really what grit is, this combination of passion and perseverance over the long term. Without that sense of purpose, it's hard to stay motivated. I totally get that. And you're not alone. Duckworth talks about how purpose doesn't always come easily. For some people, it takes time to find that thing that really drives them. But she also says that you can cultivate purpose by trying to connect your current work to something bigger. Like ask yourself, how does what I'm doing help others? Even small shifts in perspective can help. That's a good point. I think I've been too focused on my personal goals and not thinking about how my work fits into the bigger picture. I should probably start asking myself those questions. It's worth a try. I've been doing that myself lately. And the fourth part, hope, is super important too. Duckworth explains that people with grit tend to have a growth mindset, meaning they believe their abilities can improve with effort. They don't give up when they fail. They see failure as a chance to learn and get better. Yeah, I've heard about that concept of growth mindset from Carol Dweck's work. It's about believing that you can get better with effort, instead of thinking you're stuck with the abilities you have. It's interesting that Duckworth ties that into grit, definitely. Duckworth builds on Dweck's idea and shows that people who have a growth mindset are more likely to develop grit because they don't let setbacks define them. They stay hopeful and keep working toward their goals, even when things get hard. That's inspiring. It kind of makes you rethink failure, doesn't it? Like, instead of seeing it as a dead end, you can view it as part of the process. Exactly. And that's something gritty people understand. They embrace failure as part of the journey. Duckworth shares all these examples of famous people who failed over and over before they succeeded. People like Will Smith, who said he's not afraid of failure because he just works harder than everyone else. Will Smith? That's cool. I guess it makes sense. When you hear people talk about their success stories, it's almost never a straight line. There's always a struggle in there somewhere. Yeah, and it's easy to forget that when you're in the middle of your own struggle. But Duckworth's point is that perseverance through those struggles is what ultimately leads to success. It's not about having a perfect track record. It's about showing up day after day, putting in the work, and not giving up. It's like the old saying, it's not about how many times you fall, but how many times you get back up. That fits with what you're saying about grit. Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I found this book so powerful. It really shifts your perspective on what success looks like. It's not about talent or luck. It's about sticking with something, even when it gets tough, and putting in the work over time. That sounds like a great mindset to have. So how does she say we can develop more grit in our everyday lives? Is it something we can consciously work on? Yeah, she gives some really practical advice. One thing she suggests is the hard thing rule. This is something she does with her own kids. Basically, everyone in the family has to choose one hard thing to do, and they have to stick with it for a certain period of time. It could be learning an instrument, training for a marathon, or anything that requires effort and commitment. That's a great idea. It kind of forces you to stick with something even when it gets difficult, instead of bailing at the first sign of trouble. Exactly. And it teaches you to be resilient, to push through challenges, and to see things through to the end. Duckworth says that building grit is like building a muscle. You have to work at it consistently over time. I love that analogy. It makes grit sound like something anyone can develop, not just something you're born with. Totally. And Duckworth stresses that grit is not fixed. It's something you can develop and strengthen throughout your life. She also talks about the importance of surrounding yourself with gritty people and being part of a culture that values perseverance. She says that grit can be contagious. That's really interesting. I can see how being around motivated, driven people could push you to be more gritty yourself. Exactly. Duckworth gives examples of teams and organizations that have built cultures of grit, where perseverance and hard work are celebrated. When you're part of a group like that, it's easier to stay motivated and push through challenges. It sounds like grit is not just about personal development, but also about how we can create environments that help everyone succeed. Exactly. Whether it's in families, schools, workplaces, or communities, Duckworth argues that creating a culture of grit can have a huge impact on how people approach their goals. When the people around you value hard work and perseverance, it's easier to develop those qualities in yourself. That's something I could really use at work. Sometimes it feels like everyone's just coasting, waiting for the weekend, and it's hard to stay motivated in that kind of environment. Yeah, Duckworth says that changing the culture around you can be one of the most powerful ways to develop grit. It's about creating an atmosphere where people encourage each other to keep going, to push through challenges, and to stay focused on long-term goals. That's so true. It's easy to fall into a negative mindset when you're surrounded by people who don't have that drive. Maybe I should start with myself and see if I can influence the people around me. That's a great approach. Duckworth would definitely agree with that. She says that we all have the power to shape the cultures we're part of, whether it's at work, at home, or in our communities. I'm really glad you told me about this book. It sounds like there's a lot I can learn from it, especially about sticking with things even when they're tough. I could definitely use more grit in my life. I think we all could. It's one of those books that makes you rethink how you approach challenges. It's not about being perfect or having all the talent in the world. It's about showing up, putting in the work, and believing that your effort will pay off in the long run. That's such a great message. I'll definitely have to read it for myself. Thanks for the recommendation, Abdou. Anytime, Hatim. I think you'll really enjoy it. And who knows, maybe we'll both be grittier the next time we catch up.